All right, guys. So, welcome back to Inherent Success Podcast, where this is your guide to self discovery and healing journey as well, where we talk a little bit about business, health, wellness, all of the above. It's all based on transformational stories, all about the stories here. So, today on this episode, I have my lovely friend, Dave Bravelove. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Emma. Great to be here.
I'm excited. Guys, so just to give you a little background, so I actually met Dave at a leadership workshop that we're both currently into right now. It's been a long journey, that's for sure. Just a lot of stuff. Can't get into the deets, but it's been such a beautiful journey so far. And it's interesting because we have partners in the workshop, and that's how I met Dave. We were partners in the beginning of the workshop, and ever since then we've just been able to like create such a beautiful friendship. So I'm excited to hear his story. Awesome, Dave. So how are you feeling? I know you've been recovering from being sick for a while.
Indeed, I'm feeling so much better now. I got knocked out pretty hard right after the last weekend of our training. Actually, I got back down here to Costa Rica where I live, and a couple of days after I landed, I just got super sick, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And it put me in the hospital for a whole week, actually. But I'm on the other side of it now
Yeah.
and feeling a million times better. So, yeah, which is I'm very grateful for because that was the sickest I've ever been in my life, hands down. It was intense.
Yeah. I know it also makes you think too. It's like you never know how good you feel until you start feeling bad. And it's just like when you start feeling bad and then you survive from that and you're like, "Oh my God, I'm so grateful for my health." That happened to me when I had COVID. I had gotten COVID in 2021. Like the whole entire 2020, I was like, "I'm invincible. I'm not going to get COVID." And then like later, like September 2021, I had got COVID and it was like the same day that I was like moving and everything. It was like the worst time of my life. And I was sick for 2 weeks. I had to go to the hospital and I thought I was never going to recover. And then I got pneumonia. I developed pneumonia from having COVID. So I had to go to the emergency room. I was in like my whole body was like in pain. And they gave me like hardcore steroids. And when I started feeling so much better, I was like, oh my God, I'm so grateful for my health.
Yeah,
Like you appreciate it
yeah,
a lot more,
that's
right?
that's exactly where I am right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear that you're doing so much better, Dave. So,
Thank you.
Dave, I know we've only known each other for a short amount of time, but you're such an incredible person. What
Mm,
you do, with your coaching and just like who you are as a person, your spirituality is just so beautiful. And I'm very actually excited for you to share your story and your journey going into all of that. So let's kind of bring it back. Let's bring it back to the little Dave, right? So the
mm.
little Dave, and who was little Dave before Dave Bravelove today?
Going way back. Uh, Little Dave was a very different person than I am now. That's for sure. When I was quite young, I was very unconfident, very like I just didn't have a lot of people skills. I grew up playing a lot of video games. I was really smart and good at math, kind of a nerd, and just wasn't. I didn't have like that confidence in myself to really go out and talk to women, to go after my goals, like pretty much anything. So it wasn't until I moved away at 18 to go become a professional skier. That was like the first big stepping out that I had. I lived in Whistler, BC for my whole 20s and pursued that dream and had sponsors and competed and filmed and did that whole thing until which was huge for me. I grew a lot in that time, got into personal development in that time as well, went through Landmark, started getting into like coaching as well as like I coached skiing for a long time through there, but I also got into more of like the personal development and like life coaching and started to study that in conjunction with the ski coaching that I was doing. And then just before I turned 30, I actually broke my neck in a mountain biking accident. And that was where things really started to change direction for me in my life, because my whole life revolved around throwing myself down a mountain at that point, and supporting others in doing that as well. And then I decided to make a shift, slash life made a shift for me. And with the whole neck breaking thing, that was very much where I got introduced more into the world of spirituality. I learned about meditation and mindfulness and diet and nutrition. And like when that happened, my whole world became, how do I heal as quickly as possible? How do I like get back to the life that I wanted to be living? And it was mostly focused still on the skiing at that point. Like that was why I wanted to get healthy again, so I could get back on the slopes. But over the course of that, I grew so much more. I learned so much more. I started going down the rabbit holes of spirituality and learning about plant medicine, learning about like all these different ways of healing all of the things, not just physically, but like emotionally and somatically and like all of it. So that became the rabbit hole. That's where it started for me. And then shortly after recovering, uh, I actually did start to get back into skiing once I recovered, but um, I got. I'm sure you've heard that saying, like, at first the universe whispers, and then it knocks, and then it gets louder, and it gets louder until it smashes you over the head. Well,
Oh yeah.
I got my smash over the head about a year later after still being in the ski scene. I got a really, really bad concussion after like
Wow.
slowly working my way back up to where I was in the ski world before over that year. And like so bad, it happened in the evening, and I have zero recollection of like going to the hospital, getting taken home. Like the whole evening was just gone from my memory entirely. But I remember waking up the next day, and that was the big piece of like, okay, it's time to like really consider a whole different path. And that was when I moved to Vancouver, which is where I got more into entrepreneurship and like leaning into more of the life coaching side of things. Got into men's work there as well, and started leading men's groups, and really just building myself up and thinking more long term rather than just Whistler is a very kind of uh, like living for the next paycheck and the next pow day.
Hmm.
Whereas
Hmm.
like I wanted to build a future. I wanted to create something that had more impact than I could have on my own. I wanted to, just create and like build more of a life for myself that was long term. And and then I kept going down the rabbit hole of learning more about personal development and more into the plant medicine world, more into life coaching, somatic therapy, breath work. And like, I just really love transformation and growth myself. I always wanted to just keep becoming a better and better version of myself. And as I kept learning more tools, I wanted to keep sharing them with people because I was having all this transformation myself, and I wanted other people to be able to experience it as well. So it became the natural evolution of my own journey, where now I get to share all these amazing things around mindset and healing and goal setting and like all the stuff that I've learned. I get to share with people and help them make their lives better too. So it's it's been quite the journey.
That's amazing. To kind of take it back to the time where you had your, basically double the injury, in skiing, right? And I'm a huge believer that, and what I've learned and what I've realized in my journey is like, we have these different vehicles and we get in one car and we think that's the car for the rest of our life. And that's the vehicle that's going to take us to our destination. But then that car breaks down and you try everything to fix that car because you just want to hold on to that vehicle, but then you don't realize that you need a new vehicle with a new engine that you can basically go into and drive to your destination. I know that sounds so cliche, but I really like analogies, but it's true. It's like in life with success, sometimes you're gonna have to go through these different paths and you're gonna have to go through these different vehicles, and a lot of the times going down those different paths, you're going to learn lessons. You're going to hit the wall because maybe that's not what your true calling is. That's not what your purpose is. So taking it back to the time that you had those injuries, and at that time, that's what you thought that that was your calling, that was your purpose. How did you feel in that moment when you just kept falling on your face, pretty much, literally, um, with the injuries? how were you feeling in that moment, that and what was the like the that pivotal moment, like, okay, I want to heal and I want to better myself?
I mean, it was challenging to say the least. It was like you can imagine, or maybe you can't. Some of you can probably imagine, like that was my entire life. I'd literally been skiing since I was 2 years old. My parents were both ski instructors. It ran in the family. I was, the dream of becoming a professional skier was very rooted. It was like what I'd committed my whole life to and built everything around. So it wasn't just a hobby. It wasn't just a thing that I like to do. It was everything for me. Like I was a skier. So it was like my identity. So to think about rewriting my whole identity. It was a big pill to swallow. It was a lot to take on. It was a lot to think about completely shifting and starting from scratch. Um, and also it was exciting and it was new. And there was, I was kind of in this transition as well because I had some friends in Vancouver and I actually shortly before all this went down, I had some friends that lived down here that a good friend of mine, Connor Beaton, started this company called Man Talks, where at that point it was just an event. He still had a job and all sorts of other things, but he brought a bunch of guys together to have vulnerable conversations, kind of like TED Talks, but more like share their own personal story of what it took to get where they are and like the challenges they faced and created these events where guys would come together, share their stories. They'd get the audience involved as well and like have some sharing. And I was just meeting all these people that were like entrepreneurs and they were creating cool things in the world and they were, like making money through changing the world and all up to like really inspiring stuff. Versus like a lot of the friends I had in Whistler where I worked in a bar, like I worked in bars and restaurants mainly and also coached skiing. So it was like I had a lot of people that were just, you know, like very short term focused and just working jobs and not thinking big, not in these like more expansive ways of looking at life and looking at the world. So I made the jump into that new community of like, cool, these are the people that I want to be surrounded by. So it was like it was very challenging and it was like a huge shake up to everything that I kind of considered myself to be at that point. But it was also really exciting because I was like, I know I'm moving towards being with a bunch of people that I want to be like, and I want to grow to become more like those people. I want to do that kind of stuff, not this kind of stuff that I've been doing. So it was like, it was scary and it was confronting, but it was also very exciting. So, because I could see the writing on the wall of like, if I go and do this move and hang out with more of these kinds of people, like that's naturally where I'll start to move towards myself. So, which is what I
Yeah.
wanted to do.
Yeah. I think, not think, I truly believe that if you are seeking change, part of that, like what's an important component is your circle of influence and like who you're hanging out with, like who are you getting advice from? It's like Jim Ron. Do you know who Jim Ron is?
Hmm.
Okay, Grandpa Jimmy. So Jim Ron says something in one of his talks. He said, if a guy, like, you want to know how the guy makes $10,000 a month, you want to ask him questions. If he's walking like a certain way and he's making $10,000, you want to walk the same way. If he's wearing the tight pants and he's making $10,000, you want to wear this tight pants. Things like that. He said it as a joke, but it's so true. It's like you want to be around people that are going to influence you and that want the best for you, that hold you high, that are supportive, and they're just doing big things. And as far as you know being vulnerable, when you did mention that you started going to groups with different men's, how they talked about certain things, and I want your input on this because there's a lot of um, I guess you can say some different opinions on this when it comes to being vulnerable and men being vulnerable. So, what is your take on the whole idea of men sharing their feelings and being vulnerable? Like, what does that look like for you?
It looks like something that's very important and doesn't happen nearly enough. um, it's, I mean, that's been a huge part of my life. The last 8 years, I've been running men's groups and leading men through that process of essentially like making the journey from their heads to their hearts and learning to open up more, learning to be vulnerable, learning to trust other men and be, like as men, we have a lot of societal programming plus like literal, like not just programming from the outside currently, but like we all hold a lot of actual trauma in our systems from, you don't have to go back very far, like 1 to 2 generations before most men had to be only protectors and providers. Like we were the
Hmm.
warriors, we were the ones that kept everyone safe. If we did show weakness, if we were emotional, we would die, or we would get kicked into the tribe because that wasn't acceptable. So there's like a very real thing that exists still in all of us because we carry on trauma like generation to generation. There's a very real thing that lives in most men, that it's not safe, physically not safe to be emotional, to be weak, or to be perceived as weak, or to show vulnerability at all. So it's a very new thing. and it's
100%.
something
Yeah.
that is very important as we sink into it, as we especially start to practice that in safe containers, in places where we are held, where we can open up and be vulnerable in a way that we're not going to get burned, we're not going to get taken advantage of on the other side of. Like that's hugely important, and it's something that is a process. It's not like you just snap your fingers and all of a sudden you be vulnerable, and that's not the
Right.
goal either. I don't think of guys just like wearing their hearts on their sleeves and being a puddle of emotions 24/7. Like it's just learning to tap into that, learning to be vulnerable when the time calls for it, to allow people in, to like allow, to create intimacy in their friendships and in their romantic relationships, and to let people in and let them close to their heart, and learn that that can be a safe thing to do, and that it can actually create stronger connections. It can create better relationships. It can create more happiness and fulfillment, and more of a feeling of being supported. And that is all super important for, enjoying life to the fullest. And there's just a lot of programming, as I mentioned, that gets to be unwound in order to create that. So it's a process, but it's something that's super valuable to do.
Yeah, and I know it can be very difficult for men to open up and be vulnerable and just wrap their minds around the idea of being vulnerable, because I have friends in my life where they're just like, no, I'm a man, I don't cry. I'm a man, I don't show emotion. When actually men are very emotional, but they just don't know how to use it. They can be emotional with either like they're like their close friend or their best friend, someone that can really trust, but that's just one person. They won't be in sitting around in a circle with their friends and being vulnerable and crying. So it's just like that idea, that societal idea of like, oh no, I'm a man. I have to be strong because I'm a man and I can't show weakness. Vulnerability is weakness. And that also, like you said, it goes on from generation to generation. I think now in this world that we're in, I think a lot of that is coming out a lot more, as far as like men being vulnerable and like not being afraid to show emotions or anything like that. And I don't know what your opinion is on this. There's a difference between like strong vulnerability and like weak vulnerability. There are so many opinions. Like I'm curious to see like what your opinion is on this. Like, because vulnerability, like, yes, you can be vulnerable, but if you're complaining and you're being a victim, then that's a different story. But if you're being vulnerable and you're like, because vulnerability is courage to me, so you can be vulnerable and share like, hey, this is what's going on with me, I want to fix it. And you can cry or whatever and like validate your feelings, but as long as you're like looking for a solution and you're not victimizing yourself. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a dance. I
Hmm.
see that sometimes because like a lot of men can get sucked into the like being like overly vulnerable, or almost like doing it to get validation. Like, oh, vulnerability is the game. Okay, I'm gonna play that game 100%. So here's all of my shit that I've ever done, and like, it can kind of become this like cool, I did the vulnerable thing. I told you every single secret that I have. And like all the gruesome
Like a
things that
badge of
like you didn't
honor.
really need to know. Yeah. Versus
Yeah.
like, doing it in, and it like, or in that sense, there's like a doing it to get something, or there's a doing it to like be perceived a certain way versus, like I feel true vulnerability, like the right way to use it, if you will, is just being willing
Mm-hmm.
to let your guard down and be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Like this is something that's not working in my life, and I would like support. Like I'm telling you this to let you in and to let you love me more. Not like I'm doing it to check the vulnerability box, or like, and getting into
Mm-hmm.
oversharing or just doing it for the sake of doing it. It's like, are you being willing to share what's going on in your heart and allow people to see you and support you and hold you up in those moments of in the challenges you're going through. That's kind of the opposite of being vulnerable, is the lone wolf type of situation where you just hold everything on your own. You never show any weakness, and you just carry all of the burden on your own. And that is quite a default way of being for most men and a lot of people in general, but in particular men. And doing that for the long run just doesn't work. Like, when we don't have a chance to feel our emotions and process things and let things off our system, that's why how so many men die early from heart attacks and from, their body just giving up on them, or like, having crazy health things come up because they're not, like, their body is holding all of those emotions that they've been suppressing. It's like, when you don't feel these things, they don't just disappear. They get stuffed inside. And one of my teachers has this saying that we don't push emotions aside, we push them inside. So like all these things that you're ignoring and not feeling just get stuffed down and stuffed down and stuffed down, and they have to move. They have to go somewhere. So if we're not expressing them, if we're not letting them move out of us, then they start to rot and they start to do damage inside. And that's where a lot of depression and anxiety is rooted. That's where a lot of illnesses and disease comes from. It's just like stuff that we haven't moved, suppressed emotions, traumas that we haven't healed, like things that are living in our cells, literally, and that's why this whole movement of like somatic therapy and like emotional release type stuff and working with trauma, that's why it's so huge right now, because we all have so much stuff that we've been burying, and it's quite new. It's only in the last number of years that it's become more mainstream. People are actually talking about it, and we have a lot of collective trauma that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
That again,
Yeah.
for generations, it just wasn't a thing. Like our parents weren't taught about this. They weren't dealt with. Like they're just carrying it and holding it and passing whatever they inherited from their parents. Everything they've accumulated, they pass down to us. And I feel like we are the generation that gets to start breaking the chain in this trauma that's getting passed down and passed down and passed down. We're the generation that gets to start making an impact in this. And again, like through some of the work we did in the Ascension Leadership Academy, it's like starting to
Mm-hmm.
break those chains, starting to let go of that trauma, starting to heal ourselves, and so that when we have kids, we don't have to pass all this crap down to them, so that we actually get to create a brighter future for the generations to come. That's why I believe we're doing all this work.
100%.
All right, guys, we'll get right back into the episode. I just wanted to take a quick break here to share with you guys that I do not make any money on this podcast. My goal and my purpose with Inherent Success is to be that guide for individuals in their self-discovery journey. So if you found any value in this episode, make sure to like, to subscribe. And if you know anyone that could benefit from the episode or the podcast overall, you can share with a friend as well. Now, let's get back into it.
And I wish I knew more about the somatic work and all of these resources. I feel like all of these, like you said, right now, all of these resources, there's so much access to it, and it's so highly promoted now. Like, it's like, I don't want to say it's a thing or a trend. It's not a trend. I'm sure, of course, this has been around for such a long time. It's just now people are having more access to it. Especially in our generation, I'll give you an example, and I'll share a little bit with me. Like going back to piggyback on like suppressing and then just like holding everything in. When I started, I've been in my self-discovery and not healing, but self-discovery journey for over a decade. So I started when I was 21. And my idea of self-discovery was just, and I also had started like my first business venture, But my idea was of self-discovery and improving myself was I got everything in my past and I put it on a little box and I just threw that shit in the ocean. Never again. We are not going to talk about that. This is a new me. This is what I'm wearing and we're going to run with it. So I thought, okay, personal development, read, like self-improvement, all these things. And I never addressed my trauma. Never, ever. And I had a lot of trauma growing up. I was, me and my siblings, we raised ourselves. We were neglected growing up. We weren't really loved or nurtured. My mom, my dad did the best with, they best that they could with what they had and what they knew at the time. That generation, they don't know what self-development is. It's all passed down from their parents and their grandparents and so on and so forth. So my mom and the way that they loved us was, okay, I feed you and I bathe you and that's it. I don't love you. I don't show you anything.
There's a roof
A
over
lot.
your head. That see, I
Yeah,
love
there's a roof over
you.
your head. That's how I love you. That's how I show my love. And growing up, we struggled a lot. Like my parents never had money. We moved around so much. There was no stability, a lot of things. And I also went through like really bad relationships. I was abused like several ways, all these things. And I never addressed that. So I just suppressed everything. And when I started my business venture, years went on, and then I don't know, I'm sure you know this, but this is something that I recently learned that when you're 26, your prefrontal cortex, that's when it fully develops, and that's like your conscious thinking. So a lot of times around that age, you just start thinking like, okay, wait a minute, like there's something missing, there's something going on. And around that time, 26, 27, I was like lost. I felt like I was not, I was doing the things, but I was just not happy. And I was still single and I haven't found a good relationship. And every time I would date someone, I would just project all of my crap on them. And then I was like, oh, maybe I need to make more money. I was so focused on the doing instead of the being. Like I didn't know that. I was just a lost little puppy trying to figure everything out. And when I was in 2020, when the pandemic hit, or I think 2019, I was 28, and then I finally decided to go into therapy. And it was interesting because when I first signed up, I got a psychologist, and I was telling her what was going on with me. I even cried and everything, and she didn't even tell. Right away, she just prescribed me like antidepressants and like all these things, and I was like, I'm like, I don't think we should continue this relationship. And I honestly think I got the wrong service. So thank you for your time. Because I was like, hell no, I'm not going to be labeled as this disorder. I'm not going to take all these medications. So then I found a therapist that specializes in childhood trauma. Started talking to her. She recommended some books. And then that's when I really started diving in deep and doing the work. And I started talking about my past. And then like 2021, I found another therapist and she was really great. So I was with her for like a year or two, and we started doing, exercises and like, not somatic work, but it was more of like exercises and like really diving in deep of what's blocking me and like going back to my childhood. And I was just bawling. I could not stop crying. Every session I was crying. Every day I was crying. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? And then I learned, as now, especially going to to ALA, through ALA and doing the somatic work, I was like, wow, I had so much built up inside of me that I didn't even realize. Yeah. So
Most of
all of
us do.
that, yeah.
Most of us have a tremendous amount of stuff buried inside that we just haven't allowed ourselves to feel. Because it wasn't safe, or there wasn't space to, or it's like that was that's the kind of norm, is just like deal with it, like suck it up, move forward. Especially if that was a perpetual thing, like you said, where you were constantly not feeling loved and supported, and you were constantly like trying to deal with stuff on your own. Like when you're in scarcity like that, where it's like you have to handle your stuff and like deal with things on your own,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have space to feel and cry. Like someone's just going to yell at you to shut
Yeah,
up.
like I don't got time for that. That was my mentality. I don't got time for that shit. That's literally what I would tell
100%.
myself every time. I'd be like, no, wipe your tears, girl. Like, let's go. Let's go. Let's get back
Yeah,
up and keep going.
totally. And all that stuff that didn't get felt was still inside. So it makes sense that you ended up just crying for ages once you started to dive into this, because it was all there that just it
Mm-hmm.
hadn't been
Mm-hmm.
released.
Yeah, and then doing doing a somatic exercise, I just like I was crying for hours. I couldn't stop crying, and I was like, it just felt like my heart was being like squished. It was a very fascinating experience. I was like, wow, this is so painful. Like my body was just like not, I want to say yes because it was just like, yes, I'm feeling this emotions. Because I was bottling up everything for so many years. And it can be, things like that can be very detrimental because it's not healthy because you're not really living. Like you're not really living. I feel like my experience of seeing people like that, it's just like you're just, I don't know, you're just dying. Like you have your head down, you're not feeling, you're not loving. And it's so, it weighs on you a lot. I know I'm emphasizing on this, but this is just so important because it correlates with everything in your life. If you don't release, you don't validate your feelings, um, you just want to block everything and be an angry person, you're not really living, you know?
Oh, you are, but not the way that you could be.
Not necessarily.
Like life it gets to be so much more fun than just being bitter and resentful and kind of victimy about like everything happening to you. And that's, you see a lot of people walking around like that, like they just have a stick up their butt and they're just pissed about life and everything, and they're just like upset. And then of course, like if that's your way of being, like we're talking about before, if that's how you're being in life, then you're going to keep getting reinforcement of that. You're going to keep getting things offered to you that reinforce that way of being. Like, oh, you just want to be angry all the time. Cool. Here's a whole bunch more stuff to be angry about. And naturally, like if, on like the kind of karmic level there, that's happening. But like without the woo side of it, like if you're a dick and you're like walking around pissing people off and being mean to people, like, are you going to want to treat that person with love and kindness? Or are you just going to be like, ugh? Like, are you going to kind of cut them
Yeah.
out and not want to help them? Right. And a lot of people don't really see that. Like life is just unfair. Life is just mean to me. It's like, cool. Well, how are you being towards life? Are you being supportive? Are you pouring into life? Are you trying to help people and lift people up? Or are you just pissed and miserable and like blaming life for how miserable you are all the time? you
I
know.
know. No, I
But a
love
lot of
how you
people don't.
said that.
A lot of people don't realize they have a choice, and that's where that's. I feel like that's the starting point. That's like one of the key foundational pieces of the whole personal development world. Really, is the
Hmm.
foundational understanding that we get to choose how our life goes, and we have a say in it. That you have control over what you create in your life, and that you're responsible for it. And as soon as you wake up to that and start creating that, then like all of a sudden you can take your power back. If you feel like you're a victim and everything is just happening to you, there's nothing you can do about it because it's out there. It's like the world is happening to you over there. Versus if you actually believe that you're responsible for what's happening in your life, all of a sudden, cool, if I'm responsible, then I get to say how this goes and I get to have an impact in how this goes. I have some control to like change the way things are unfolding. From that point, it's not instant. Like it takes time, it takes energy, it takes like, changing the course of your life is a big thing. But once you start, then you can, it's like that analogy. If a plane is, traveling 5,000 miles, 1 degree of difference in the heading is going to be a huge difference in 5,000 miles, right? Like you make these little changes now and you end up in a very different location down the road. So
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not willing to face their shit. It just comes down to self-awareness. And are you willing to face your shit? Like, are you willing to look in the mirror and be like, okay, you are the reason why you're not happy, you're not making money, you're miserable, you're doing the same shit every fucking day. Like, you are the reason. but people just kind of want to be set in their ways. Oh, this is just who I am. This is just who I am. This is who I am. No one can change me. This is just me. And then also pointing the finger at everyone else and blaming everyone else for all of their, like, where they're currently at in their life. I see this a lot, and it's so frustrating. You can't change people, but it's just like, it's like you and I, like, we've been doing the work. It's like we know what's on the other side, and it's so, from at least for me, it's so sad to see people like being at a level 1 to 5 instead of a level 10 in their life, you know? And it's because they're so set in their ways and they don't see like the potential that they have. And so, I've learned to have patience and have compassion for those people. But inside of me, I'm just thinking like, damn, like, come on. Like, you can do this. like have you looked at yourself lately? Like, have you had that hard conversation? Because not a lot of people are willing to have that hard conversation. There are just people that literally are just, they're like, nope, it's not me, it's the world, it's the government, it's this and it's that. And yeah, it's really sad to see. But I'm so happy that people like yourself, and also me as well, especially with this podcast, we're changing one life at a time. Like, that's how I see it. Personal development, anyone in this space that is contributing to that movement of self-development and self-awareness, at least like it's changing one person at a time. And then it becomes a ripple effect. That person changes another person, and that person changes another one. So yeah, this generation is going to break that lineage of just all that trauma and all that garbage that all of us have been growing up with,
100%. Yeah, we're the generation that gets to do that. We get
Hmm.
to turn more people's lights on. We get to help wake people up. We get to help like awaken more and more and more people, and through that, the tides start to turn. More and more people are popping open and waking up to how things actually work, and the power of positive thinking and prayer and meditation, and like putting out good vibrations into the world. And we're in the turning point of that. It's going to probably still be bumpy for a while, but I definitely, like, if you go down the rabbit holes on prophecies and all the things, like we are in that transition into a golden age right now, and we're going through the muck of that transition, but that's where we're headed, and that's what we
Hmm.
get to live into in this life, is seeing that. But there's a lot of darkness that gets to be rewritten and, and transformed in
Yeah.
order to get there. So I think
Yeah.
that's what we're
I
all feeling right now collectively, is just the like the metamorphosis of that is uncomfortable. So
Yeah. It's like the world is just still in the cocoon. And like, yeah, we're just like in there, just feeling all that gooiness of the cocoon. We haven't blossomed yet, but we will, little by little.
here we are, and as we do, we keep inspiring other people to blossom and start that journey as well. And that's, like, I acknowledge you for creating this podcast, and the more people that are like sharing these truths and helping inspire more people, the more people are waking up, and it keeps becoming an upward spiral. And that's what we need more and more people talking about this stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. And speaking of making an impact, Dave, so I would love to hear your, like, how did you feel when you decided to, coach men and do all these retreats for men? How did that feel for you? Like, was it nerve-wracking? Like, what was
Oh yeah.
coming up for you?
Well, it was a process. I first went to school for coaching and NLP back when I was like 25, so 15 years ago now. And I just turned 40, so it's been a minute. And there was a lot of work I had to do internally around self-worth, around worthiness, around all these things of like, it was one thing I knew I was a good coach, like just being in the courses and doing like practice coaching with friends with, as I was getting started, I was great at it. I was great at dropping in and helping people shift and, get excited with their goals and move towards them. But I didn't believe that I was worthy of getting paid to do it and actually having a business doing it. So it took a long time to really build that up in myself and do my own inner work to get to that point. And then as I started to do that, it was just like, as I kept growing, more opportunities came and more doors would open, more places to be of service would present. And, and eventually it got to the point where it's like, cool, if I want to do this, I just need to like commit to learning the skills required to do it, to learn like online marketing, to learn all these things that I just hadn't learned, and really commit to the whole pie, like the whole picture of what it takes to make a successful company doing this. And once I made that commitment, that was where things started to really shift. And I started to actually, it was always like a part-time thing for me for like 10 years while I was getting started. And it's only been in the last kind of 4 years since really leaning into that, really making that commitment that it's actually started to become something I could do full time. And that was like COVID tied into that and everything, moving down here to Costa Rica. Like there was a lot of elements of that where it was just like, I needed to make it work. So I just figured it out. But as I have, it's been beautiful. Like getting to spend my time supporting people and changing their lives, like helping them cure addictions, helping them make their relationships work, helping them like bring back relationships from the brink of disaster and separation, helping people like find their own confidence and step into new projects and new goals and create new businesses. Like, everywhere I go, I get to support people in moving towards what they want to create in their lives and helping them even like realize that. A lot of people don't even have a sense of what that could be. A lot of people don't let themselves dream and think about, like, they're just stuck in their, they have the blinders on. Like,
The
this is what
tunnel
my life
vision.
looks like.
Yeah.
Like this is my life. This is all I've ever known. Like my whole family, no one's ever been successful or had money or done anything other than just work a job and, complain about how miserable life is. It's like
Mm-hmm.
helping pop people open to like, seeing what's possible and thinking outside of these little blinders that they live in. It's beautiful. It's like, it's so rewarding getting to do that kind of work and inspire that kind of change in people. It's, I'm so grateful that I get to do it. I have to do a lot of other stuff that, that I don't always love, and the marketing and the behind the scenes and like everything else that goes into it. But actually getting to do that work is beautiful and so rewarding, and I've loved it. And so it's a real gift to be able to do it.
How did it feel because transformation is beautiful to see. Like when you can get someone, right? They start with you and they start from like this, like whatever state they're in, timid or afraid, not confident, all this stuff. But then let's say you see them in 90 days, like, and you see their transformation. Like, how did it feel for you to see that your first transformation, like your first client, your first, mentee, how did it feel to see that transformation? And this is an important question for people that maybe you're listening to this or you're watching this and you're getting into coaching, right? And you're like, you don't have the confidence. For me, uh, success is fuel your ambition. So when you're able to achieve something like a goal, and as far as like getting someone's results in transformation or whatever that may look like, the type of services you're getting, that fuels your ambition. You also build confidence with them. Like, wow, I was able to do that. It felt so good. Let's do it with someone else. So how did that feel for you? And was that like the component, that one thing that you were missing to like boost the confidence and keep moving forward?
Totally, totally. That was a huge part of it. The like you said, it's like seeing those results is a big part of what gives you the confidence. You're like, oh, I'm good at this. Like, look at what like. It's not just showing up in the session and being present and like being like helping them have an
Mm-hmm.
insight. It's like, can you help people cause transformation in their life? Can you stand for them? Can you hold them accountable to not just having the insights and the realizations, but actually putting things into action in their life and making big changes? And I'd had like little versions of that throughout, but it wasn't really till I created my first signature program and I had my first few people running through it that were on like a 6-month committed container with me to really like dive in, or 3 months when I first created it. It expanded into 6 months because I tried to cram way too much stuff into 3 months. But having my first couple people go through that and really that were like committed to really taking it on. I had one guy who was, like smoking a couple packs a day and like smoking weed all the time and completely disconnected from his family and his kids and flailing at work. And once he committed and stepped in, he was like, all right, it's time to like do this. Like, I'm here, I'm ready, let's go. And he, just quit all the things right away out of the gate, drinking a ton too, quit that. And like within weeks, he just started to have these huge transformations that were because he'd committed to really taking that on. And with my guidance and with a lot of the breath work we were doing and somatic work of like moving all the repressed rage and stuff that he'd been holding in his system his whole life, like he just started to lighten and completely transform his whole life and relationship. And, it's like, and there was like a few of those that were all happening at the same time that were just like, that was when it really started to shift for me of like, cool, like this isn't just like, it's not just that I figured out how to like market and sell a program. It's like, I'm changing people's lives. And like, that was like, oh, okay, cool. Like if I can do that here, I can keep doing that over and over again. And like, of course people would pay money to do that because like, who wouldn't want to save their marriage or like come back from the brink of like, being super addicted to all these things? Like who wouldn't want to actually change their life and transform? And so it was a really beautiful, like for me to then, because as my confidence shifted, I started attracting in more clients and, getting more people to support, and it ripples, right? It's, and then it just keeps going. So pretty
I
fun.
think no, I love that. That was beautiful. I mean, like, I truly believe that as a coach in anything, you have to have passion for helping people. I truly believe that, like, when you put people first and you are purpose driven instead of just like money driven, like everything just flows. And don't get me wrong, like, financial freedom is the byproduct of like providing a really good service. Like that's bound to happen. That's extremely inevitable. If you provide a great service, that's what's going to happen. But to me, like with coaching people, like what's really important is just having like that passion, like truly caring about people. And like I would never I've seen this. I've seen a lot of businesses fail and like people fail. If you just only think about yourself and you're greedy and you just want to like take instead of give, you know?
Totally. It's a thing. Again, that's a big mindset shift that a lot of people go through as they get into this work, is like not just taking everything from life, but like, how do I pour into life? How do I give? How do I, be a giver? Because as you give, things come back to you. And, versus when you take, it's like lopsided. You end up having people that are just drained around you all the time. Versus if you're giving and pouring into everyone around you, then everyone gets to rise, and then naturally people will give back to you as well. So it's like giving becomes an upward spiral, whereas taking just like depletes people, and it's not a sustainable way of doing life.
100%. Yeah. And it may work for some people, but
Yeah, and for a
if you
time,
just,
and there's
yeah,
a lot of that in our culture right now. You look at a lot of the big industries; it's like they're entirely based on taking. Big pharma and the oil industry, and like they're all built on like just taking, resources from the planet, like getting people addicted to things that they have to like keep like pouring money
so they can
into.
keep buying.
And we're in, I think, again, as I said, I feel like we're in a big like transformation, a big metamorphosis, collectively right now. And it's going to be a little bumpy for a minute, but it's moving towards like actually setting ourselves up to be sustainable, because a lot of those practices just aren't. A lot of those industries and a lot of those big massive structures that our whole society is built on are dramatically flawed because of that one core piece. It's like they're all built to take, as opposed to like to give and to lift each other up. So, but we're in a time of
I
that
agree.
evolving and changing. So it's exciting. It's just like, it's going to be a little bumpy. It already
A
is,
little, but
but,
yeah.
but
Yeah, it's a bumpy ride, but and who knows, maybe not our generation, maybe like 5 generations forward, if we just keep doing, but we'll keep doing what we're doing right now, just continuing like this whole community of self-discovery and self-development, all these podcasts and doctors, like people that are really just looking out for the good of humanity. they just continue to contribute into this, then, who knows, maybe 20, 50 years, we'll finally have our metamorphosis experience as to like, well, the world can blossom into a butterfly. So yeah.
Totally.
And
But we're in the goo right now.
we're in the goo right now,
Yeah.
in the slimy goo. Um, Awesome, Dave. And I would love to hear like what is your vision right now? Like where do you see um yourself like with your coaching practices and like your retreats with men, etc. Like what are you working on right now? What's exciting right now?
Thank you for asking. Well, again, a lot of the work I do is exciting in general, just like a lot of this deep somatic work that I'm doing with men and women. I've actually been, like, for whatever reason, there's been a lot more women coming in lately into my world, working with trauma, working with the body, really helping them actually get underneath what's going on so they can cause like sustainable transformation. So that's always exciting. Pardon me. And there's also a few things that have like been coming through, channeling through that I'm creating and stepping into now, which is I love the work that I do. I love being able to support people, and I'm limited in the amount of impact I can have because it's intensive work. Like you're going deep with people. You're, it's like I can only take on so many clients at a time. And so I'm in this process now of starting to create things that can create more impact and transform our lives without me having to be doing them, always like spending my time doing it. So I'm working on building some courses right now. The first one is around intimacy and ritual devotion in relationships. So I'm excited about building that and creating something that people can, take advantage of for way cheaper than I would, that I even just doing a session with me, they can get a whole program that'll guide them through creating more intimacy in their relationships. And in conjunction with that, there's a whole brand and product line that's coming out that is like to support that. Intimacy products and massage oils and lube and like things of that nature that kind of again make that whole process more fun, because
That's so
sometimes as
cool.
longer term relationships, it's it can seem like monotonous, or it can get boring or whatever. So it's like creating things for people to really enjoy that process more, so they can stay more in love and they can have more fun with each other. They can, breathe more passion and more devotion into each other, and really enjoy each other and intimate connection, because it's not something that needs to wither and die. It's something that if we cultivate and if we pour into, it can sustain and be a beautiful flame that exists in both of us that fuels so much more of what we are up to in the world. So that's been a big space that I've been playing in, is the conscious relationship space. It's for many, many years. It's been a big theme of my coaching that I've been doing. And so now I'm creating things to support that even more. And as I said, create more impact beyond just what I can do in sessions with people, but creating things that just make it more fun and easier to, for people to create more intimacy, have more fun together, and enjoy each other and themselves that much more. So that's exciting. That's in the works right now. That'll be over the next little while. Next time you have me on, we'll have a lot more to share about that, I'm sure. But it's
Oh
all just in
hell
the
yeah.
beginning
Oh my
phases
God,
right now.
we have to do a number two, because I love talking about relationships. And
Me
I
too.
think yeah, I've already had, well, like both platonic and romantic relationships are like amazing
Totally.
topics to talk about. Yeah. But more
Totally.
so
That's what
like
life
the
is all about.
romantic. Yeah, yeah, it is. And more so also just like the romantic side, because it is true, when you are with someone for a significant amount of time, it does get a little, like things can happen, and like it can get a little bit of like the disconnection or like boring or all these things. And then that's great that you're providing a resource of something for couples out there. That way, instead of just like doing their own thing, they can be able to go to your program or just find other resources in general just to improve their relationship. So I love
Totally.
that.
To work
I'm
on
so
it and help
excited
it
for
grow.
you.
Thank you. Me too.
That's amazing. Yeah. Oh my God. No, yeah, we definitely have to do another episode, episode number 2 with Dave Bravelove. I mean, I loved everything that we talked about on this episode. And I do have
Likewise.
one more question for you.
Of course.
So this is a question that I always ask all of my interviewers, and everyone always gives like a different question, like a different, excuse me, a different answer to the question. So I would love to know, what does inherent success mean to you?
Oh, good question. What is inherent success? Uh, I mean, what comes to mind when I hear that is that like success is something that we all have a birthright to have access to. You know, that it's part of our system, that we're actually built to have success, to have abundance, to have joy and prosperity in our lives. That it's not just something that's for the few and the select, you know, but we have to remember that. And I feel like that's what, I mean, everything we've been talking about today, this whole path of inner work and all this is not, it's not fixing the brokenness in us. It's just like reprogramming all the false beliefs that we've inherited along the way and coming back home to the source of, you know, like we talked about, this kind of idea that we are inherently worthy and lovable, and you know that success is something that we are all meant to experience in this life if we're willing to let go of the limiting beliefs and all the stuff that's preventing us from being there. So that's what comes to mind when I hear it.
I love it. That's so beautifully said. Yes, we are born with such unique gifts. And of course, as we get older, it just little by little, it just gets suppressed and suppressed and suppressed, and we forget who we truly are. I love that.
Absolutely.
It's so beautiful. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being on the show today. And where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Dave Bravelove, or through my website at www.brave-love.com. Those are the two easiest places to find my stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll put his information in the description below, guys. And once again, thank you all for watching or listening. And if you found any value in this episode, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, share with a friend that can also, you know, benefit from this as well. And you guys can chit chat about it. And stay tuned for the next episode. Dave, thank you so much for being on this episode. Love you guys.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.